Good morning. It's roughly 10 a.m. on July 26th. I'm Luke Smith. I'm here with Eric Furiulo and Stephen Murphy and a couple other folks as well from the YUI team, and we are going to have ourselves a little open hours right now. So, starting with the usual sort of news, we have 360s coming out awfully soon. Eric, you want to give us the details on the 360 schedule real quick?
Yeah, sure. So last week we pushed the what should be the last preview release, PR4. That's up on the CDN, and yep, there's the post on our blog about it. So this release really didn't have too many new features in it that are user-facing, because behind the scenes what we did is we wrote a bunch of tests. We did a lot of functional testing of our examples and trying to automate that process. There's tons of examples that we have, and we wanted to make sure that they're all tested, so that we know if some code changes we make break an example. And the reason for that is that the examples are more complex and real-world use cases of using YUI. So it was
a little bit closer to real-world use cases, anyway.
Yeah, in theory.
Right.
And so we did that. That was the majority of the work that everyone was spending time doing, just to make things more solid. And there was a couple new additions in the world of the app framework components. We promoted the model sync REST extension, and this provides a RESTful HTTP sync layer for models and model lists. And this was in the gallery for about almost a year now, and got a lot of usage and went through a couple iterations, and it's just something that's so common when people are working with the app framework that they need to be able to talk to a server, that we decided to promote this module. And then also there's another new addition, which is lazy model list. And this is something that that Ryan Grove wrote that came out of actual using it and building an app, where he wanted to have thousands of model instances in a list, and to help deal with the performance of that, the model instances are instantiated lazily and only when they're needed, and it provides API methods to help you free up your memory usage when you don't need those model instances anymore. So that's what lazy model list is. It's a subclass of model list, and those are
right. And there's some hope that data table was going to be using lazy model list, or at least there will be an iteration or a version of data table or configuration of data table that uses lazy model list in the future. That's the goal going forward.
Yeah, so that's why it was great to get this in now, and so that way data table and anything else can start using it, and also so people who have applications who have thousands of models that they need to work with will find this very useful.
Yeah. So the lazy model list, the basic idea behind lazy model list is, instead of storing a bunch of instances of things, it just stores a basic object. So just a raw JavaScript object. You're not going to be taking any more memory than it's absolutely necessary to store that initial state. And then it gets vivified into an actual model instance, emitting the events and all of those other things, if you actually need an instance of the model. So that's actually pretty exciting, although that it is somewhat unusual for us to be bringing in new features so late in the PR cycle before a new release is coming out. But this is one of those situations where lazy model list was not upstream of anything, so it doesn't actually, if there are bugs introduced in lazy model list, it doesn't actually affect any of the other code in core. And model sync REST is kind of a gallery success story where it's actually been used. It has been talked about. It's been supported. It's had some feedback in the forums and some good discussion about it, and it's proven itself to be pretty solid, and there's definitely a use case for it. And I know that Clarence, who is also with us, Clarence has been building some other implementations of sync layers using different, against different transports. And we can talk about that maybe in another open hours, but I like the idea that the model sync REST is establishing somewhat of a baseline for an API for expectations of using the sync layer and providing the sort of guidelines for other people creating new sync layers to be able to share them and follow an existing convention for those APIs so that they can be swapped in and out depending upon the different type of storage that you want to be syncing to in your model instances.
Yeah, that's what we're
and
we have a few
what's great about the ones that Clarence, we can't actually hear you too well. You might want to get closer to the mic. Go ahead.
What was that? It's being attacked by dragons.
Sorry about that. But basically, we're trying to see if we can get model sync local, which is the one that uses local storage, into 3.7. And model sync.socket, which uses socket.io, will probably stay in the gallery.
Okay, that's good to have that.
And they're both in the gallery right now, so people can start using them, and we would encourage you to, so you can give feedback to us and specifically Clarence, and so that we can get some real usage happening on those components while they're in the gallery, so that when they migrate over, or when the local storage one migrates over into core, it's already been somewhat battle tested.
Yeah, we want the same sort of success story from the model sync REST for those others as well. But that's awesome that we're starting to move on the different transport layers in terms of getting the sync layer built into the model side of things, because that's some pay dirt there, I think. So a couple of quick notes before we move on to the content, because we're taking a little bit of extra time here doing the news, and I don't want to take too much of your time, Stephen, because there's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of interesting content in the tag module. So just about new heads on the team, I didn't mention last week, and I apologize, Tony, that I did not mention that Anthony Pipkin, a.k.a. A. Pipkin from YUI, from the YUI channel in IRC, is now officially a member on the YUI team, as is Tilo, who last year was interning, and he graduated from college or something, I think, and so we snatched him up before he got his wits about him. So he's now on the team as well, and the voice you heard, the sultry tones of Clarence just a moment ago, is our current intern, and if all goes well, then when he graduates from college as well, we might just snatch him up as well, unless let's just not go there. Yeah. So new folks on the team and a lot of great momentum going on, and so let's talk not about 360 now, but let's talk about the gallery. So Stephen, give us a little history about the tag module, what's going on with that, and just to be clear, you wrote this thing from an existing use case, or was this sort of a fun exploration, or how did this all get started?
So this all started when I saw what the Xtag folks were doing. I really liked their ideas, and I wanted to be able to use this here at Yahoo, and so that was the inspiration behind the tag module, and so I started playing with that, and I came up with the tag module and submitted it to the gallery, and my coworkers thought it was cool, so I started adding more to it, and I added the tag module registry, which is a collection of tags, and I will go into more detail about that later. But it all just started because I was scratching an itch, and that's how it started.
Cool. Well, I think you actually put together some slides and stuff, so you have some stuff to show us. Oh, one last little piece of news is we have a couple of new videos up on our YouTube channel about the YUI communication layer. This is part of Access that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the communication layer that handles the back and forth from client to server. And then Carity has given his talk from Bajax as well, talking about Access, I think, at a higher level. Okay, so with that, let me stop sharing my stuff, and I will let you share your stuff, and you can give us a rundown.
Okay, so this is a live slide deck, and everyone could look at this while I'm presenting. The URL is the first link I posted in the chat. So if you load that up, I'll just wait for just a second. So now I'll begin. So today I'm going to be talking about creating custom HTML tags with YUI, aka how to use the tag module. My name is Stephen Murphy. I'm a senior software engineer with the Yahoo search team. Been at Yahoo for about 5 years. And so what is a custom HTML tag? A custom HTML tag is a user-defined tag that behaves like a standard HTML tag. And what do I mean like a standard HTML tag? Well, here in this HTML snippet, you see I've defined the YDate tag with a date format of %y, which corresponds to the current year. And so on page load, this tag will replace its inner HTML with the current year. And you should be seeing copyright 2012. And so for this next example, a little bit more advanced, what we're going to do is just append some nodes to the DOM. And we're going to dynamically, on button click, add these guys in there, and they should show the current time. So I'll just try that right now. Let's see what happens. As you see, we're getting some new nodes in there with the current time. Okay. And this next example, let's say you have a tag on the page you would like to update dynamically. So on page load, it will get the current time, as you see here. And on button click, what we're going to do is we're going to access the tag plugin on this node. So every node has this tag plugin, and we're going to set an attribute called date with the current date. So let's just update this right now. As you see, we're updating an existing tag. So how does this all work? Well, you require the gallery tag module, and you'll have access to this YTag namespace with the register method. And the way this works is you register a CSS selector. In this case, it's the YDate tag and a mixin. And so whenever this selector is found on the page, it will call your created method with the config. The config is the attributes on that element. And in this case, for the date tag, we're going to add a date attribute. And we're going to set the value to the current date by default and provide a setter so the user can change it. So that's it. That's all it took to create this standard DOM-like element. And so what are the benefits of all this? I think the biggest benefit is getting rid of boilerplate markup generation and object instantiation. If you've ever worked with large applications, you'll see this pattern time and time again. Create the markup and then instantiate an object pointing to that markup. So this offers you an alternative where you register your tag and you can append anytime throughout your code and it will be instantiated for you. You're just dealing with markup. And more benefits. Well, it's incredibly easy to use this type of thing. If you don't have a lot of JavaScript experience, it's just HTML. So really easy for non-programmers to use this. Large projects will also benefit in that You don't have to go requiring modules throughout your code. Just append some markup, and your component will be instantiated for you. You're basically letting the DOM do the heavy lifting for you. Some other features about the tag module. So you can also register attributes. And in this case, I have an image with the high DPI attribute. And what's going to happen is on a device that has higher resolution, it will be able to pick up the higher resolution image. However, if you're perhaps on a browser that doesn't have JavaScript enabled, you're not going to have a problem here. The image is still going to load. So that's how to provide a more graceful degradation approach. And the next release of the tag module will support registering classes, and this is useful for validating HTML. So you have valid HTML there. And so this is a collection of tags. It's called the tag registry. And I would hope for more tags to be added to this by contributing users. So I'll just walk through what tags are available right now. We have the Y autocomplete tag, which these are basically wrappers around existing YUI modules. So we'll try this. As you see, everything works as you would expect. And Y button, again, it wraps the button module in YUI. And here's a Y dial. We can play with that. And a calendar. And so one of the most interesting things I think about the tag module is doing data binding. You're seeing a lot of web frameworks right now supporting data binding in some way or another. And this is a very simple way to connect events from one node to another. So this is an example of connecting the change event to this text here. As I'm typing, it's going to update automatically. And this one is going to connect the change event to the label here next to this. And so very fast, very simple to use. And I encourage you to look at the source to just see how easy that is. And here we're binding the output of one element to the input of another and vice versa. So these guys are connected directly. And in this case, I've added a simple click counter. So this is a little bit more advanced usage of the YBind tag. So you can do some pretty dynamic things. There's a lot of possibility there. And if you like what you've seen here with the tag module, you can read the documentation, the gallery module pages, and I'll just talk about the inserted event briefly. What this is kind of the magic behind the tag module. So it uses CSS3 animation to fire events when a selector is found to match. And if you're on a browser that doesn't have CSS3 animation support, it will fall back to DOM mutation events. So the earliest version of IE that supports mutation events is IE8 or IE9. So it has support for all the major browsers at the moment. And as I briefly talked about, it is inspired by the Xtag project, which is a project by Mozilla. And I encourage you to check that out. It's a really nice project. So that's my presentation. And if there's any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Thanks.
Sure. So
I think it'd be interesting to look at some of the code. I know like the inserted event module that you're talking about sounds pretty intriguing, and then also how the actual data binding stuff is working. I was actually just at this last weekend Throne of JS conference in Toronto, which there was basically a bunch of people who are writing the JavaScript web application frameworks, getting around and talking about things, and one of the biggest themes there was this idea of data binding.
Yeah, data binding has definitely been a hot topic. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and actually, if you have a moment, we want to do a little intro about the Xtag project, just so we have a little bit more context. It seems like we have a couple of minutes that you could do a little description of that.
So the Xtag project is they're basically writing a framework from the ground up to be as simple as possible, and you basically just use standard DOM methods like document.createElement, and it overrides that method and will instantiate your custom tag if you had registered it. So
what is this implemented in? Is this JavaScript?
This is JavaScript. Yes.
Okay. So it's not actually modifying the runtime, not actually modifying the Gecko engine or anything like that.
No, it's nothing like that. But I saw what they were doing here, and I thought, this is great, but you don't need to reinvent the wheel. They're doing a lot of things in their own way, and I thought it might be interesting to pair the ideas with a mature framework like YUI, and it's proven to be kind of powerful. So
yeah, see, when you were going over the implementation of having the calendar tag, the autocomplete tag, and all of those things, it actually reminded me very much of the web components spec, the W3 web component spec, which was actually referenced there in the Xtag. So it seems like the inspiration then comes originally from the web component spec, which is also something that's worth reading up on. I think Alex Russell has been pushing this one, and maybe even Paul Irish as well. But that one certainly seems like the holy grail of the future, where you can actually just define components in code and then associate those components with tags, and then it's not necessarily it's not a JavaScript framework that's doing the work for you. It's actually the browser itself just has native support for extended behavior through this web components APIs and things like that. So
I wonder if that would help progressive enhancement as well, if the browser is able to do some of that work, because I guess that's one thing that's kind of suffers here is anything that you would want to work without JavaScript. You would have these elements on the page that wouldn't be interpreted correctly. It'd probably default to a block level element or something by the browser.
So
right.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
That's a really good point. And when I was playing around with the range slider in Chrome, I tried it on Firefox, and it wasn't supported. So there's an opportunity where you can define these type of elements that have mixed support for different browsers and provide the missing functionality. It's kind of like the modernizer approach, where you what's the term? But basically, yeah.
Like so polyfill?
Polyfill, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right, which is actually, in essence, one of the main goals of any UI library, right? So YUI as part of YUI, including the UI library portion of the library framework, contains components like calendar and data table and tab view and autocomplete and those sorts of things, which are extending the paradigms of what markup is capable of doing. And so you take these encapsulated problems and create a solution, a configurable solution, and then the challenge of the library is to wrap that up in a relatively convenient and yet flexible API that doesn't cost too much to the implementation, but ideally is also focused at broad support across browsers with and without JavaScript enabled, or at least hook into an environment such as that. So when we have, I guess, Eric, this is kind of to your point about it'll be interesting when we get more web component support going forward that it will it'll alleviate problems like the progressive enhancement issue that certainly exists in the case of the tag library, where if you have no JavaScript, then all you have is markup that doesn't make any sense. So in some applications, actually, that's not a deal breaker, right? I mean, you have a complex web application that in some cases it just requires JavaScript in order to be effective. You know,
yeah, I mean, especially if people have to log in to use it, right? Then you have that ability to apply some extra requirements for the application, like, hey, you have to have JavaScript in a modern browser to use this thing, and we're seeing that more. And I think that if somebody has to log in, you're afforded that extra ability to impose requirements.
Yeah, that's true. You know, there's always that golden ideal where any application is capable of being backward compatible to just simple HTML, and form submits and links all do the right thing. But in the real world, you know, developers only have so much time, and affordances have to be made. So, not to downplay the importance of progressive enhancement, because it is definitely something that you should be prioritizing for certain. But in many cases, if you're going into a set of legacy code, you can't really do that sometimes. You know, you're already locked in through legacy code into an environment like that, for example. But speaking about the time aspect of things, how going forward, as new browsers come out, let's say, for example, when I'm hopeful when I say when the web component spec gets finalized and starts getting some early adoption in the browsers, those will be leading edge browsers, and so the amount of adoption for that will increase over time as the older browsers then fade away, and hopefully the IEs won't be holding on for dear life for so long as they do today, and we'll be seeing a lot more version churn, and so more features becoming more readily available sooner, and hopefully the consumer world that is actually running on the various IEs will be more welcome to the idea of updating versions more regularly for the sake of features and security and stability and those sorts of things. But in the future, when we
Stephen show us some of the code details in the tag stuff.
Sure.
Not to cut you off, Luke.
No, that's fine. Let's see the code.
Okay, so I've got the gallery tag code here, and what I'm doing is just adding the register method, unregister, and registered. Basically, that's your interface to dealing with registered tags. And then this tag plugin is a node class level plugin, and it gets plugged in whenever you've included this file. So at this point, any node will have this plugin available. And
Stephen, can you bump up your font size a little bit?
Yes. So that's the tag module, and it's doing some checking of the current node if it matches any registered tag or attribute as fast as possible. And if it finds a match, it's going to create the mixin or add the mixin and call the created method.
So can you go into detail about a couple of points? One was actually brought up by Tony in the chat earlier, which was how does the tag plugin exist on a given node? Are you responsible for plugging it into those nodes, or is it exist on every node? How is that being how's that being handled?
It will exist on every node because I'm calling here in this last method, plugging directly into the node class. And there is a hook in the node initialization method that will accept plugins. And I had to do a bit of crawling to find it, but it's there and it works. And so that's really how I tap into all this within the node class.
But that creates an instance of the plugin on every node that's touched in the system, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's so there's an opportunity there for some performance improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh hey, by the way, on 138 there, just use y.array.each. You know, for anybody listening or watching the video, don't use y.each. It's just
oh, so in this case, I think it's actually a yeah, you're right. Okay.
Well, there are very few cases where y.each is actually the right thing to do. It's if you're passing in an object that actually has its own each method, then that makes sense. But otherwise, you know, typically it's a y.array.each and sometimes y.object.each. But that's just a distraction anyway. Carry on.
And so we saw the tag registry module, or tag module. So we'll look at the registry. And there's a bunch of tests. Check out the index page. This isn't my computer, so I don't have this checked out. But you can check this out and open up index.html. It shows all the tags in usage right now. And these guys are all separately defined. Very simple definitions. Let's see. Y button. So it's creating a button with the attributes passed in from the node. Let me boost up the size of the screen. Okay, so, and when this tag is inserted, there is the tag inserted event you can listen to, and it's on the host, and you can render the widget when that event has fired.
So if you were to create this node off the DOM and then inject it into the DOM, that's when the tag inserted gets fired? Not on the creation of the node, but when it is appended to the DOM?
Well, the instance is created here. I create the widget instance, and then I only render it on insertion. So everything, I try to do everything on create, and things like widget depend on some CSS stuff, which works better when you have it on the inserted event.
So I guess at a high level, what I'm seeing is that the priority of the tag library is to take these sort of bundled up solutions, which we typically have as widgets, and instead of being creating an instance of a widget and managing that object separately, or even having a plugin that then associates an instance of a widget or creates an instance of a widget and associates that with the node as its host, that this goes one step beyond that, which is inspecting the DOM for triggers to say, do this automatically.
That's right, because most widgets are bound to their DOM markup, obviously. And so it's just combining the notion of, you have this object and this markup. Well, let me go from this markup and get that object directly.
So then the interaction with the widget instance under the hood happens how then? If you have a node in hand, for example, and you know that that node was vivified into a calendar, then how do you interact with the calendar?
So that's all up to the definition here. Like, I can expose that widget in an attribute. And so I could have instead created this widget attribute and then instantiate the widget, and so it would be exposed in that way.
Okay, that's pretty easy then. It's actually similar to the end result of creating a plugin then. So if you had a plugin for a button or a plugin for a calendar, say, and you said node.plug this calendar plugin, then that's going to use its NS property, its namespace property, and it's going to store the instance of that plugin on the node directly on that at that property. So in this case, the property that you're using is effectively _widget. So it's reminiscent in that way of the plugin infrastructure, but it's actually a little bit thinner in that you don't have a subclass or a separate class instance that is sort of a middleman between the node and the button itself, or the node and the calendar itself. Like a plugin would be a middleman, or a subclass of calendar that also worked as a plugin would be a middleman. So here you're bypassing that.
Right.
So it ends up being sort of reminiscent of an alternative to using plugins that ends up working more or less the same, except for there's that additional magic of the tag insertion stuff.
That's right.
So do you want to talk about the tag insertion stuff then? Sure. That CSS3 transitions stuff sounded very intriguing.
Okay, so let me boost this text size up. So this is the inserted event, and the way it works is it checks for the CSS keyframes in the browser config, and if that's available, it will create a very simple CSS animation that fires in practically 0 milliseconds. And on animation end, there is an event that you can listen to. So it's called animation start, and when that event is fired, that's when I check if the selector has a match for the node, and then that created method gets called for you. So this is really the magic behind the tag module, and so I also have a fallback for the mutation event. So this is the code path for IE, and it uses DOM node inserted. So when a node has been inserted, it will do a selector test and see if it matches. So this is a little bit slower, but it's a backup method for browsers that don't have the latest and greatest.
And you said that I know that the DOM mutation events aren't terribly widely supported. Well, I guess they're widely supported in modern browsers, but you're actually bypassing that for modern browsers because they also support the animations, and that's a pretty slick little routine you have there. But the DOM node inserted right now is servicing IE only, more or less.
It works for Firefox and Chrome, but as I said, it's kind of slow. It's not performant, so that's why the mutation events pretty much go widely unused. There looks to be a future improvement in this where you can just bind to a let me see, sorry. I think they mention it here. Let's see. So there is this new spec coming out for custom elements.
Yay.
W3. So hopefully this will alleviate this concern of having to do this like CSS3 animation type thing or fallback, and it'll just work without any extra code.
But I guess my question was, you have CSS animations are serving some browsers, and the DOM node inserted is serving other browsers, right? So you have a fork that's going on.
That is right for this event.
Right. So the DOM node inserted is right now is serving IE because it doesn't have the animation.
IE9 is the earliest version of IE with mutation support.
Okay, so 8 and back, this module just doesn't work.
That it will work on page load, but inserted events will not trigger.
Oh, good to know. So it works on page load because it's firing a DOM node inserted event on page load, or is it work on page load through some other mechanism?
It works on page load because the selector has been registered. Once the selector is registered, it just checks a match on the document, and if it's found, then it will initialize that. However, there's no means to work with inserted events if it's not supported.
Yeah, okay. I was curious. I hadn't heard of the quirk of DOM node inserted actually firing once on browsers, and I was curious if there was something there for me to learn. But okay. But let's see. And do we know? Sort of an edge question, but do we know about Opera support?
Opera is supported. I tested early in development, and things worked.
Is it through? Does Opera Next have the animation, CSS animation events?
I believe it does, yes.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Oh, okay. Right, cool. And then is Firefox just not prefixed, or you're doing a different?
Firefox doesn't require the prefix. Well, actually, sorry. It uses the animation. It requires the prefix for the CSS keyframes rule. However, the animation start event is just the standard one.
Okay. Prefix. Interesting. Cool. Yeah, that's a neat little trick. I like that. Let's see. There was something else that I was thinking of, but now I can't bring it up. So, anybody else have any questions or feedback or thoughts? We can edit out the dead air in post-production. No? Okay. Let's see. All right, so that's the tag module, and it's out in the gallery, and this is actually, there are 3 different modules that we're talking about. There's the tag registry module, there's the tag module itself, and then there's the tag inserted or the node inserted. What was the name of that module again?
Event inserted.
Event inserted, right. So that's a synthetic event. And so each of them is the registry module by itself. Does that add any value, or does it need the tag module to be working? What's the relationship between those two? So
there's actually not really a tag registry module. It's basically a container for a bunch of tag definitions. And so this builds all the files, and once these are built, you can add a little bit of, one second, pull this up. Sorry. Okay, so I have a little snippet of JavaScript that you add to the YUI config, and it's that which will allow you to do tag dash and then the tag name, and it will automatically pull from the registry for you. So this is what you'll use to be able to do tag dash references. It will look at the name and load it from the registry here.
Oh, interesting. That's neat. I like that actually. That is another cool use of the loader config there.
Yeah,
I like loader hacks. Pretty cool. Well, that's really interesting. I think I gotta say I love the data binding aspect of it. Oh, and if you want to go into take a peek at the data binding code, that would be pretty cool too.
Sure.
But the infrastructure side of this I think is really interesting, and I like the I'm intrigued by the opportunity here for a style of code that is more node-centric, but it isn't really burdened with creating plugin instances and doing a lot of the manual work about creating plugins. Right now, there's the caveat of browser compatibility, but if that's not an issue for your environment, then having the added magic in there is actually it does make things awfully convenient.
So I remember there was like a YUI Simple project. I think this is kind of like YUI Simple 2 maybe. It's just really simple to work with, and you're just doing HTML stuff here. So really easy. And I'll talk about how the YBind tag works. And so
yeah, that was another thing I meant to ask you about. Was that tag also supports creating custom attributes, and so
yes.
Learning about the attributes was also new.
So YBind isn't so much a tag as an attribute, and you can add that to any element. And so when you see here, I have an input box and this text. Well, there is no attribute on the input box, but on the span, I am binding to that input, and I say ref key up. And so what does that mean? Ref key up means when my reference, which is this, the input box, when there's a key up event on that, then I want to replace my inner HTML with the value of that. And so that's how these guys work. And you can have as many as you want. They'll all work the same. And so let's take a look at the next one.
Could that be a data bind, a data dash bind, or data dash y bind, so they can use the data attributes in this?
Oh, so that's right. So in this case,
oh, there you go.
I bound to, in the definition of YBind, let me pull that up.
Oh, weird. That was a tag and an attribute.
Yeah, I did some mixed usage. So in the definition, I've bound to a tag and a tag or an attribute. So that's how these both work. This is the tag version, and then this is the attribute version. So there's some flexibility there.
Okay, so then you would define a custom attribute using the y.tag.register using the square bracket, so the selector that captures the attribute.
It's selector syntax.
Mm-hmm.
And my next version will have class support, so you'll be able to say like class equals ybind data dash ybind parameter, and then there will be 3 ways to tap into tag modules. Okay, so in this case, I'm listening to the change event on this input box and updating the value here. Similar idea, different event. And these guys are binding each other's elements and changing their values. So that's how this works. And now the click counter is kind of interesting here. So I'm defining this custom click counter tag, and I'm going to, whenever this button is pressed, or this will reflect the current count change. And count change is a custom event. And let's see here. So that's actually an attribute change event. So this is going to, whenever I click submit here, I'm going to call this click method because I'm binding the form on submit to call clicked on the click counter. So that brings me down here. And then I just update the count +1. And just doing that creates the count change event, which is listened to here. And so it will update its inner HTML. So very simple definition, and you can get pretty complicated with what you do.
And yet it ends up being really terse. I really like how tiny that registration code is.
Yeah.
That's very nice. Cool. Eric, I know you were having some audio issues there. Are you come through now? You want to try your audio again?
Yeah,
there you go.
Can you hear me again? Okay.
I heard the cough. You're there.
Yeah. So some of this this data binding stuff actually, Clarence has been looking at within the YUI app framework to do similar stuff from model changes. So like if you have a view that is referencing some model or observing its changes, whenever those changes happen, to be able to update the DOM as a side effect. And because we're seeing, where people are writing a lot of boilerplate code essentially to do this binding when in fact it could be very helpful to do it more automatic. So it's really awesome to see that you're already thinking about this stuff and dealing with some of the issues like when things are inserted and that sort of stuff. So
it's definitely I really
to collaborate with you on this.
Everything. Right now, like what I want to do with data binding is doing something equivalent with handlebars, and I think like having something like the tag registry would definitely be really cool.
So, Stephen, can you talk about where tag is being used? You said you were scratching your own itch, but are you using this in a production environment?
I haven't yet, but I would love to if given the opportunity. So currently, it's not being used in my day-to-day job here, but I'd like that to change, and that's why I'm talking about it here and hoping some Yahoos will check this out and maybe give it a chance.
All right. Well, that's a great overview. I really appreciate that, and some really interesting ideas here, and really like the ease of the API in particular, and a lot of good work on the data binding aspect of it, and a lot of problems that certainly other people are familiar with, and its orientation with the future of the web components spec. I like that as well. So, yeah, folks, go and check it out and give it a try. Give it some good. Give it any feedback, any questions, and file bugs, because we like stuff to get battle tested. And Stephen, give us an update on it if you do end up getting some application running with this, and how YUI can better serve the tag library and vice versa, for sure.
Will do. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Stephen, and we'll look for an update on this soon. And we're out of time now, so we're going to close out this open hours. Thanks again, Stephen, for joining us. And I don't have any special parting words today, so drink heartily, my friends, for it's almost the weekend. How about that? So for Eric Ferguload, for myself, Tony Pipkin, and Clarence, and Alan, and Derek, and all of those other folks in the YUI team, inside and outside the YUI community, this is Luke Smith signing off. We'll see you guys next week.